Just want to say real quick before I do get into this video, as you guys know, I am not a contributor, and because of that, Wargaming does not give me any of these tanks for free to test out for you guys. So pretty much all of these tanks I'm reviewing have cost me real money, and as you know, I literally own pretty much every single tier 10, tier 9, tier 8 premium in the entire game. And because of that, this account's probably worth more than a lot of people's houses, which is quite sad, but it's probably the truth. However, with that aside, if any of you guys would like to help me out on Patreon so I can afford to make more videos for you guys sooner on like the VK90 or any of the newer tier 10s and other vehicles like the Chimera coming into the game, please make sure to do check out my Patreon. You can see the link in the top here. Also have it in the description down below as I normally do. Yeah, just make sure to go check that out if you do want to help me out. It's like $2 a month, or you can even do $100 if you are insane. However, it does help me out. It makes the channel really grow a lot quicker. So if you haven't already checked it out, make sure you do. And if you don't want to help me out, that's fine as well. Make sure to continue to watch the video and enjoy my content. Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome back to another one of my videos. I am Droodles Blitz, and today I'm going to be talking about the Tier 10 collector and premium vehicles that will be hitting the Blitz Fair. Now, not all of these tanks are guaranteed to be hitting, just because only the AMX-30B M60 T22 medium have been announced that they're going to be hitting so far. I'm not sure if tanks like the T95E6, the Chieftain Mark 6 121B, but I'm still going to be sticking them in the list just because I want to give my reviews on them, and if they do hit, it's going to be a lot easier on you guys whether or not you want to be picking them up. Now, also, I just want to say as a little disclaimer that the opinions I'm going to be saying in this video, I'm not sure if they're 100% on par with my reviews on the tanks, like my T95E6 review. I'm not sure if they're going to be exactly on par with them, just because some of these reviews are years old, and I've only played these tanks today. So I'll still probably have the same general opinion on them, but if I say anything different, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll make sure to clarify them at the end of this video, or I'll make a follow-up video. However, the first tank you can see here is the T95E6, and this is a pretty solid heavium. And if you're wondering what a heavium is, it's when you pretty much get a heavy tank or a medium tank, you either give it more or less armor, pretty much turning it into the middle of the mix. So the T95E6, as you can see, I have pretty much been penned, not pretty much, I have been penned on every single shot that has hit me so far. And that's because it is not the most armored heavy tank. It's got a very nice top speed though. It has 42 km/h top speed, which is exactly the same as the Chieftain Mark 6. However, one thing this tank does have over the Mark 6 is a very, very nice, to be honest, excellent power to weight ratio, which completely just pushes the Chieftain out of the room in a straight line, or should I say just driving up against it. However, one thing I will say is the Chieftain has better high explosive pen because it does get hesh. The Chieftain has better shell velocity. Its premium ammunition is different. This tank shoots heat, which in my opinion is actually better because it has more penetration. However, the Chieftain does get APCRs, its premium ammo, as well as its main ammo, which means that the ammunition has just one of the best shell velocities in the entire game, making it also one of the most accurate guns in the game. This tank's gun is more like an E5, where it is pretty accurate, however I wouldn't call it extremely accurate. But as you can see, even though I did lose quite a bit of my hit points at the beginning of this game, we still picked up 3,300 damage. Now, personally, I will get this out of the area right now. I'm going to say that the Chieftain is still a stronger tank in my opinion. First of all, it doesn't have this huge cupola sticking out in the top of the tank, and this cupola might not be the biggest weak spot because actually the edges of it are about 250 thick. However, it still is pretty easy to hit with any high penetration rounds, especially with tank destroyers. As well as I said, the top speeds are pretty much identical on these tanks, just a little bit slower acceleration on the Chieftain, but the Chieftain's gun is just so much better than the E6. To be honest, I really feel that if you already have the Chieftain, or you are deciding to pick up the E6 or the Chieftain for this Blitz Fair if they do come out, I personally would say that the Chieftain is just a better tank in general. And talking about the Chieftain, let's get stuck right into the Chieftain's replay. Now, as I said, the Chieftain Mark 6 is pretty much, in my opinion, a better version of the E6. And that's the sort of thing that I never really understood about the T95E6 is there wasn't really a point to buy it when you could just get a Chieftain Mark 6, which is pretty much better in every single way. As I said, the E6 does have a better power to weight ratio, but that's pretty much it over the Chieftain Mark 6. First of all, the Chieftain Mark 6 looks about 5 times better in my opinion. It's one of the nicest looking tanks in the game. Very clean cuts, smooth angles, as well as its rough look, and everything overall just looks very nice on the tank. Its gun is, to be honest, the best gun at tier 10 in my opinion. Now you can say the Leopard's more accurate or the 62A's got a better damage per minute, but this tank sort of combines everything you want in a tank with that gun. It's got 400 alpha, it gets that amazing hesh. The shell velocity is just excellent. It's just overall a very, very good gun. And as I said, I personally rate it the best gun in tier 10 just because it has all those characteristics going for it. And to be honest, the fact that the T95-6 only has a better top speed over this tank, and that's pretty much it gains. The aiming time is worse, the shell velocity is worse, the accuracy is worse, standard penetration is worse. It does get heat, which does have better penetration, but the APCR is just such a quicker shell velocity, and the gun's so much more accurate. There really isn't a point to get the 95-6. So, again, as I said, pretty much if you do have the choice of either one, and you're thinking about picking them up, definitely pick up the the Chieftain Mark 6, because look at this Hess shell right there, 523 rate in the side. You would not be able to do that in pretty much any other tier 10, especially the E6. So it's just an excellent tank in all regards, and not to mention that they both have 10 degrees of gun depression, but the Chieftain Mark 6, I pretty much run it like a full-blown heavy. You can see I'm running it quite aggressive here. 2200 damage picked up already. I'm going to be pushing it up against this E100, and that's just because, unlike the T95-6, this tank has a very, very strong upper plate. The upper plate, in fact, is about 290, 300 millimeters thick because it's such a steep angle. So that means that pretty much this E100, if he were to shoot at me, would auto-ricochet right off of my upper plate. However, he is looking down on me, so now it's about a 50-50 if he were to shoot at me. You can see they're trying to see if I can get my Hesh, and unfortunately it is an E100 we're talking about. But you can really see that the gun is just so accurate on this tank. The aiming time, very good. It's just such a strong tank, and to be honest, it's probably my favorite tier 10 heavy in the game, just because of all the categories it does fulfill. Now, there is one thing I will say the E6 can do a better job at, and that is being a medium tank. Because I said the E6 has that better power-to-weight ratio, it does a better job at keeping up with the mediums and getting into those medium positions. And it really does make a difference in some battles where you need to be able to hold a line or get into that position very quickly. But overall, and all in all, the Chieftain just does a better job at everything, a better all-rounder. And if you haven't picked this tank up in the Blitz Fair over any of the other collectors and premiums, to be honest, I would say this is the best bang for your buck. Not to mention, it's probably going to be one of the cheaper tier 10s because it has been sold for quite a bit. As well as it does earn nice and hefty amount of credits, 108,000 this game. Now, I am running a credit booster, but even with that on, I still would have earned around 60,000 credits, so that's not too shabby. And as well as the E6 does earn an amazing amount of credits, it actually earns the most amount of credits at tier 10, but since you will be doing better in the Chieftain Mark 6, to be honest, they even out pretty well. But let's get stuck into the third tank. Now the next tank we have is the 121B. Now the 121B is a pretty cool tank. First of all, it has one of the coolest camos in the game. It's literally a solid gold camo, which how can you deny a tank that literally is made out of solid gold? Too bad they didn't give a camo like this on the Type 59. However, with that aside, the 121B is sort of like you get the 121 Chinese medium, and then you combine it with the 62A. It has both parameters of tanks. It's got a very, very nice top speed. It's got very, very nice accuracy, aiming time. It's got a nice damage per minute, around 3,000. It also has a pretty average damage of 350. And the nice thing about that is there's not really any tank that's like this in the game. You know, the 121 does 420 damage, and it's a very large tank. It's a very different playstyle just because it does that damage. And the T62A, how it has that much higher damage per minute, loses the average damage this tank does, where the 62A does 310 damage. This tank does 350. And while that might not sound like a huge difference, it can do the part in certain scenarios. And the 121B also, unlike the 121, as I said, is not a super large tank. It's got a very nice camo rating. Overall, I definitely do like the tank. However, one thing I will say is out of all the tanks in the Blitz Fair this year, or the tanks that will be hitting it, to be honest, I think this should be the lowest on your list. Personally, I don't really love the playstyle of this tank. I really don't run it that much. Now, it can definitely be a super strong tank. and it can dominate some ridgelines and areas. As you guys know, the T-62A was literally just buffed to 7 degrees of gun depression, and to be honest, that buff pretty much rendered this tank useless, just like the Object 140. And not to mention, the 121 also received a damage per minute buff with that 420 alpha, and as I said, received a damage per minute buff. So because of that, the two other comparisons in this list almost sort of make this tank useless, just because they can do almost everything this tank can, because one of them might have a less alpha gun. However, they still can output a lot more damage per minute, and that extra gun depression really does make a difference on the 62A. But you can see I'm still managing to fend for myself in this game, and even though I've only pulled out 700 damage, I definitely am going to be able to rack it up. And while I said this tank definitely isn't, overpowered like the 62A is now, and yes, I think the 62A, in my opinion, is completely overpowered with this buff, I still feel that the 121B is a pretty strong tank, and I'm not trying to throw it under the bus in any single way. It definitely still can do the part. If you do like the playstyle of the 62A, and you do like the playstyle of the, Chinese mediums, this is definitely a nice medium mix. It has a very nice camo, as I said. It looks awesome. It's got a very nice top speed. I actually think it goes a little bit quicker than the Chinese mediums and the Russian mediums. I think it almost goes like 60 kilometers per hour. So it definitely can do the job on the speed. You can see also it has that heat, which can pretty much penetrate through anything it does, and it's got that very solid Chinese turret armor as well, so nothing's going to be getting through the turret of this vehicle. And it is a solid tank. You can see we've already pulled out 2,900 damage now, now 3,000. It's definitely a strong tank. Just in my personal opinion, I think that the M60, the AMX-30B, and the T-22 medium are just much stronger vehicles in their own elements over this vehicle. However, I have been told that this tank will be receiving another buff, so it could be getting better. So I'm still not going to throw this tank under the bus, and it probably will be a little bit cheaper than most of the other tier 10s, just because it has been sold for quite so many times. And I think it is the original tier 10 premium tank that has ever hit the game. However, there is one thing I will say about this tank, and it does not earn credits. It's like the T-22 medium. That is also another downfall of the T-22 medium, is it doesn't earn a lot of credits. This tank literally earns, it pretty much breaks even. The VK-72, to my opinion, actually does a better job at earning credits. So, unfortunately, I really have to say that this tank, to be honest, I would say is the lowest of my list, and I would definitely say, if you haven't picked up any of these tanks, definitely do not try and pick up the 121B on the auction if it does come out, just because it, to be honest, is the lowest out of all of them on credit earning, win rate. It's just, to be honest, not the best tank. So that is my personal opinion. I know a lot of you guys probably do love this tank, and as well as many of you probably hate it. But that's just my personal opinion, so I just want to say that also right now, that all these are my opinions, so if any of you disagree, that's completely up to you to decide. I just want to point that out. Now you can see I did earn 119,000 credits, but again, I am running a credit booster, so that is one thing I just want to point out. All these tanks I'm earning great credits in are because I'm running the credit booster. Let's get stuck into the 5th replay. Up next, we have probably the highest wanted tank on all of your bucket lists, being the T-22 medium. Now, there are barely any of these tanks you pretty much find ever in the matchmaker, and that's just because of how much money it cost to pick this tank up last year. In fact, it cost around $600 US, which is just completely outrageous and outright ridiculous, but people still bought them. I had to get it because of YouTube. I wanted to make a video on it. Not to mention, as you guys know, I do love my tanks, and I just wanted to have it in my garage. But just like me, so many other people did want to pick up this tank, and rightfully, you didn't spend the money because you are smart, and you wanted to save that $600 and keep it in your bank account and not get into a divorce. However, T-22 medium is coming back this year, and my guess is it probably will be quite a bit cheaper, judging that the VK90 will be hitting the stores as the big main prize instead of the T-22. However, I would not keep your hopes up on it being cheap, because as I said, it is probably the highest on your bucket list, probably more than the VK90, even though the VK is the main tank of this year. And to be honest, I don't blame you guys for it being on the top of your bucket list. I would rate this tank as overpowered, especially for tier 10. It's rare for me to do that, especially to say that certain tanks are overpowered in tier 10 being such a balanced tier, but This tank just pushes the limit so far, it's almost ridiculous on how well this tank does in every single scenario. So you may be asking, well, what makes this tank overpowered? Well, first of all, it has 3,500 damage per minute. Now, I am running calibrated, but that's just because the penetration is so crap in this tank. I almost need to run calibrated to make sure that my heat rounds can penetrate Jagdpanzers and E100s, turret cheeks, and, just stuff that really you definitely would not be able to do without the calibrated ammo. So make sure you do run calibrated if you do pick up this tank. But your damage per minute still is going to be through the roof compared to pretty much any other tier 10 medium. And because of that, this tank can just tear apart the enemy. Not to mention that ridiculous damage per minute, the gun of this tank is also quite accurate. Dispersion is almost impervious. It's just ridiculous. Also, armor profile, ridiculous, one of the best in the entire game, especially for a tier 10. This tank almost gets more bounces than some of the competing tier 10 heavy tanks. And the reason of that being, if I were to pause it real quick, is because you can see there's sort of like a triangle at the back of this tank. And if you look at the front of it as well, the front hull of this tank is shaped like a triangle. And it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see where the spaced armor is on the side of this tank. You can see it's sort of like has this two fine lines on the edge of these tanks where they cut across to the tracks. That all the way goes down to the point at the bottom. That's because this tank's entire hull, believe it or not, is a triangle. So first of all, front track wheel, this tank is impossible to damage the vehicle through unless you just completely overmatch. Also, though, this whole side here is completely spaced armor. So because of that, it's just one of the most ridiculously thick side armors in the entire game. It's like almost aiming at an IS-7. It's just a black hole that sucks up your shells and never lets them see the daylight again. It is just so nasty. And it's just a monster at eating heat shells, eating pretty much any shell into the side of the tank. And if a lot of you want to pick up this tank and you wonder really how to run this vehicle, I would suggest to use your side armor more than you use the front armor, because the front, to be honest, isn't super strong. It's only around 220, the lower plate's about 230 thick, which is strong, but as you know, pretty much every tier 10 is around 250, so the front is actually the weakest part of this tank. Use your side armor to the advantage. You saw me earlier reverse side scraping up against that Foch, and that's because when you reverse side scrape in this tank, it makes it probably the hardest vehicle in the entire game to penetrate, and it's just quite ridiculous how tough this tank is to pen. So there's really no downsides to it. Not to mention, I'm not sure why Wargaming in their right minds gave this tank 6 degrees of gun depression over the 5 it should have been given, but it has 6 degrees, which pretty much makes it better than a 140 now with the gun depression. The T62A has 7. This tank is just so good in every single category. It pretty much is broken. It is overpowered, though I will say that. However, a lot of the times I say tanks are overpowered, you guys take that very, very just deeply. You want to take this stuff with a grain of salt. You have to remember that when I say tanks overpowered, first of all, that's from my personal opinion, and I'm a very, very skilled player. So when I say these things, it can definitely very, very differently approach you as being a not skilled player or a not so as advanced player. And not to mention, when I say tanks overpowered, that doesn't mean that you can just run it right into the front of a tank like a Jagdpanzer and just completely come out unscathed. You will be hit very, very hardly and penned every single time if you do push this tank too aggressive. I've had moments where I've pushed it too aggressive and just been completely eliminated off the map. So you need to remember that when I say tanks are overpowered, that doesn't mean that you can just run them like you would run a Smasher. This tank can still be very easily taken out by enemy tier 10, so don't just push it way too aggressive if you do pick up the tank. Run it like you would run a 62A, like you would run any other medium tank, but just remember that you can be a lot more careful in this tank because it just eats so many shells in the side of it. However, you can see here, we pretty much perma-tracked that Jagdpanzer, and 5,900 damage later. Woof, this is just a strong, overpowered medium. Even Mead C agrees it is an overpowered medium at tier 10. Credits earned, that was with a credit booster on. I just want to point out, you can see that booster earned us 40,000 credits. That means in this game we would have only earned about 30,000 credits. And that was with a 6,000 damage game. It definitely does not earn credit. So if you do want to get a tier 10 collector, and in my opinion, the point of getting a tier 10 premium, and this is something that I really argue, is if you're getting a tier 10 premium tank or collector, you should be getting it because you want to earn credits at tier 10. As most of you guys know, you cannot permanently enrich tier 10 tanks, and they suck at earning credits. The 183, I lose about 30,000, 40,000 credits every game, even if I do 5,000, 4,000 damage. And it is a fun tank to run, but it just loses so many credits. It's almost disheartening when you just do so much damage and you lose credits because you shoot your Hesh. And that's the same with like a 113 or any other tank that you need to shoot heat, like a T62A. And a lot of you guys are probably shooting more heat than me. I personally don't even run that much premium ammo. But, some of you guys might have a little more trouble penning your shells, so you load heat more. And the point of running a tier 10 premium, in my opinion, is to earn credits and to have fun. And if you're buying a tier 10 premium just to be overpowered and do extremely well in tier 10 and try and cheat your way at tier 10 games, to be honest, that's not what these tanks are for, in my opinion. I find tier 10 fun just because it's a very skilled and balanced thing. I really find it very sad when I see players, just even skilled players, like if I see a Pramo member in my own clan running a Foch, I sort of actually feel like shame on them because they're a very strong player and they know what they're doing. And if they pull out a Foch, that shows that, to be honest, they're sort of cheating the matchmaking just by pulling out such an overpowered tank. I like to run more challenging vehicles because then, as in the title, it challenges your play style. It makes you play better as a player. So to be honest, don't buy these tanks because they're going to make you a better player or they're going to stat pad your win rate at tier 10. Buy these tanks because you want them, because they're fun to play, because they look cool, because they do the part. Don't buy these tanks just to boost your win rate. But with that aside, as I said, the T22 is a very nice tank, does the job. Definitely not overpowered in my opinion. Some other people disagree, as I said, like Meadsy, but that is my personal opinion. But without further ado, let's get stuck into the final and probably the rarest tank. Now, the final tank in this list is the M60, or should I also say the most controversial tank in Blitz. Now, the reason this tank is so controversial, and a lot of players still don't know about this tank's backstory, is because about 4, maybe even 5 years ago, I don't remember how long ago it was, but about 5 years ago, for some reason, Wargaming just decided to hand out a couple of these tanks to random people. I'm not sure if it had to do with how much money they spent, or how much they played the game, or how old their account was, or anything like that, but Wargaming just decided to give away these tanks. And in fact, on Christmas morning, I literally woke up, loaded into my Blitz account, and literally noticed, congratulations, you've received a tier 10 M60. And I was like, wait, what? And then I asked my friend if he had the M60, and he said no. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. How is that fair? And it completely wasn't fair, and that's probably why this tank is one of the most hated tanks by a lot of players in the game. It probably caused quite a few players to quit the game when it first came out. But without that, I will definitely start talking about the M60. So what is so special about this tank? Especially because you don't see a lot of them in the battlefield. Well, the M60, it's pretty much like a buffed M48 pattern in almost every single way except for the armor profile, and I'll be getting to that in just a little bit. But this tank has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is, as you can guess, the best gun depression you obviously want. It does only have 1 degree over the rear, though I will say that, so definitely don't try shooting people from the rear of this tank. So it has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is actually 1 more degree of the pattern. A lot of players don't know that. As well, the M60 has a better power-to-weight ratio than the M48 pattern, which gives it just a much better stable top speed than the tank. As well, the M60 has more accuracy, better aiming time. So overall, when you take a look at this tank statistically, you're like, well, the tank seems better in almost every single way, as well as the turret armor is exactly the same as the M48 pattern. So you may be thinking right now, well, what's the point of getting the M48 pattern when you could pretty much own an M60? However, there is one huge difference, and that is the armor profile. Now, if you take a look at the M60's armor profile, you can see that it's pretty much flat on the sides of it. Now, the edges do curve down a little bit at the bottom of it. However, when you take a look at an M48 Patton's hull, it is completely rounded. And what that means is that when tanks aim at it, they can get some very, very troll bounces on the sides of the tank. The M60, oh, you're not going to have that happen. Every single shell pretty much fired at this tank's side will overmatch it and go straight through. There's not going to be any bounces. As well as the front. It's not a very, very angled front. You can see it's pretty much just completely flat. So because of that, the M60 is very, very easy to penetrate when aiming dead on. However, there is one thing I will say, and when you do get this tank on an angle using its 10 degrees of gun depression, that very, very flat and pretty strongly armored upper plate, you can see that that angle becomes very, very thick when you are using your 10 degrees of gun depression. Now, the Jagdpanzer still will be able to pretty much pen us everywhere on that upper hull, where an M48 patent might be a little bit trickier to pen. However, look how quick that gun aims in. It is, to be honest, one of the most accurate tier 10 guns in the game, especially for a medium tank. Very nice damage per minute. Overall, I really, really do like the M60. It used to be my favorite tier 10 medium in the game before the AMX-30B came out. And if you were definitely trying to come home with one tier 10 medium this game, or you like mediums more than heavies and you don't want to get the Chieftain, personally, out of all the mediums that are coming into the game, I would rate this number 1 over the AMX-30B, over the 121B, over the T22 medium. It just does the part. You can see 5,300 damage. I literally played this game 40 minutes ago. It was a pretty simple game. I played 2 games in this tank. The first one I did was 3,200. This was the second. It's very, very easy to rack out damage. And it's not a super, super skill-based tank because, as I said, 10 degrees of gun depression, a very, very thick turret, about 250 thick with the edges of it. It does have little cheeks on it in between it, but it's still pretty much one of the toughest tanks to take out in a hull-down position. Overall, I really do like the tank. Not only that, it looks just epic. It's very, very good overall, and it has a little bit of history stuck in with it. Now, a lot of you may be asking, why haven't I put the Badger in this list? Well, first of all, the Badger was literally just in the store. It actually still might be in the store. I'm not sure on that, but it literally was just in the store. So first of all, if they do put it in the Blitz Fair, I don't really care that much because it was literally just for sale, and you all just watched my video on the tank being for sale. So you already know my opinion on that tank. As well, the Badger, if it comes to the Blitz Fair, I'm not sure how much it'll be or anything like that. I'm guessing they're not going to be putting it in it because, as I just said, they literally just sold it. So if you missed your chance on that and you thought it might come to the Blitz Fair, I'm sorry, but it probably won't be. But other than that, guys, I hope you did enjoy this video. I just wanted to release this as sort of like a little bit of a helper guide on what you might be wanting to get if you did go for any of these tanks in the Blitz Fair, or you don't want to pick up the most expensive one, or which one suits your playstyle. This hopefully will give you a better understanding of all the tanks, their abilities, and everything other than that. Again, this is just my personal opinion. Don't take every one of these things with like, personal opinion, because you might like certain tanks better. If you don't like the playstyle of an AMX-30B, or you don't like the playstyle of a Leopard, you definitely won't like the AMX-30B playstyle, but you might like the T22. So it's all personal opinion based. So I just want to get that out of the way now. Don't completely take my, if I say the AMX-30B is overpowered in certain hands, don't think of it as overpowered completely, because you might do awful in it. But other than that, I hope you did enjoy this video. As always, make sure to smash that like button if you did. If you didn't, hit that downvote button. Also, if my voice is a little bit raspy today, as most of you know, I did have a stomach virus yesterday. I was pretty much sitting in front of the toilet all day vomiting. But other than that, guys, I should be fine. Everything else is good. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Good luck in the Blitz Fair.